So a little bit about the AC and DC current. I know that we look at we look at certain protective mechanisms, muscle spindles and GTO, and how it responds to that stimulus with E-stim and how it causes those contractions and what people feel. Can you elaborate a little bit more about DC and what it does, and kind of helps kind of reset in some cases that muscle contraction or recruitment?
Yeah, for sure. And that gets back to, you had mentioned, a moment ago also the mapping process where we take one of the electrodes, and if you're listening, you can't see me, but if you're watching, you can see I'm actually taking an electrode and scanning it around on my, shoulder and chest, pec muscle here. You actually would take an electrode and literally scan around. And what we're doing there is using the effects of direct current to, instead of just causing muscles to contract everywhere like you would get with alternating current, we're actually sending sensory neurological signals into the nervous system and up to the spinal cord and brain. And those signals are essentially the same signals that would happen if you're moving or loading or stretching or challenging that tissue anyway. So you're getting those same, for the clinicians listening who know terms like the muscle spindle, the Golgi tendon organ, like you mentioned, Marcelo, for the clinicians listening, we're actually stimulating those same mechanoreceptors. If you don't understand what those terms mean, that's no problem. It basically is little sensors in the muscle that sense the load or the amount of tension or force, or sensors that sense the length and the stretching of the muscles. And they basically are there to make sure that we don't exert too much force and injure the muscle, or stretch too far and injure the muscle or the tendon or stuff like that. And so what we're doing, so because those are essentially protective mechanisms, what that does is those, if we're overly sedentary, if we don't use our bodies as efficiently as possible, over time, those protective mechanisms get set too conservatively. And those are the underlying neurological mechanisms for why we get stiff and lose range of motion and lose function and get weaker over time and stuff like that. And so what we can do is actually scan around and find precisely where those patterns are dysfunctional, or where there's guarding in response to an injury, and where muscles are being shut down because of injury or just because of bad habits developed over time. So we actually scan around those. And then once we find those areas, we can send this signal, this direct current signal in there, to accelerate the process of neuromuscular reeducation. So you're re-educating or retraining, repatterning the neurological control in those areas.